Welcome to the Thrive Today podcast. I'm Natalie Born. I'm the media host for Thrive Today and the founder of Innovation Meets Leadership. We are a platform for women who lead and believe. And today, our guest is Stephanie Chung. She is the author, and I've got the book right here, of Allied Leadership. I'm so excited. Welcome to the podcast, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for having me, Natalie. This is going to be a blast. I can already feel we're going to have way too much fun.
That's right. Well, what I'm really excited about is your background. And typically I do like a big introduction of our guests, but I kind of wanted you to talk about your background because you have such a great background. And I'm excited today because we're going to unpack ideas like communication, psychological safety, allyship, building stronger teams. And so can we dive in just talking a little bit about your backstory?
Sure. So you want me to talk about me? You got
Yeah,
it,
let's
Natalie.
go.
Say less, sis. Say less. So a little bit, I always like to say that I started off in the baggage claim and ended up in boardroom, right? So literally that's my journey, baggage room to boardroom. So when first, I always want to give credit where credit is due. My father was a master sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. And so I grew up a military kid. So I was that kid that moved every 2 years of my life, new city, new teacher, new people, new schools, new lunchroom tables, new everything, right? So, the good thing about that is that I grew up around planes. And so I would hear planes take off and land every single day of my life being on active military, specifically active Air Force bases. So my love for aviation really was birthed when I was a little girl. Now, that said, I knew that I wanted to be in aviation my whole life, but I didn't know what I could do in aviation, Natalie, because whenever I would see aviation depicted in TV or film or magazines or anything like that, I would see if you were a man, you were a pilot, and if you were a woman, you were a flight attendant.
Yep.
But none of those pictures ever looked like me. And so, though I knew I wanted to be in aviation, I honestly didn't know what I could do in aviation because I'd never seen a person of color depicted as an aviator. So, fast forward, my very first job that I had was parking planes and loading luggage at the Boston Logan Airport. That's where I would say I start off in baggage handling. And so that was the very first job I had. I loved that job. And then to make extra money, because I was so broke, right? I would go work overtime upstairs at the ticket counter, checking customers in for their flight. And so one day I was there. Now, I was in Boston, so we had a really big presence, the airline that I worked for at the time, in the city of Boston. And so I would see all the executives flying in and out of the airport because it was our headquarters. I knew who they were, Natalie, but I didn't think they knew who I was, right? They're the leaders. So I think we all know who the leaders of the pack are, but we don't necessarily know everybody that works there. And so one day, one of the leaders, his name was Jim, and I always like to give Jim a shout out. He came to me and he said, Stephanie, every time I come to this airport, I see you with the smile on your face, serving customers. I think we have you in the wrong position. I think you should be in sales, right? And so I was like, I didn't know anything about sales, but I trusted Jim. And so fast forward, I then went into sales and worked for the airlines for many, many years selling, and then was recruited into private aviation where I, started off selling private jets and then eventually became the head of the sales for that particular division, then became the first African American in US history to become a president of a private jet company. And then I
Wow.
went on to become the chief growth officer of Wheels Up and helped take that company public. And now I'm on an advisory board for a company called XTI, which is making some new aircraft that will be in market, probably 5, 7 years from now. So it's been a really amazing journey. I have loved my journey the whole time, but I started off at the very, very bottom in the baggage handling perspective, and now I'm in the boardroom. And so it's been a 40 years overnight success.
Yes. It's interesting when I think about your story about Jim and
Mhm.
how that to me was the person who saw you
Yeah.
and showed you a path of what you could do,
Yep.
especially when you were asking that question, like, what can I do in this space? And so, what does it really take, when we think about that leadership skill, not only us as leaders, but also thinking about the people that we lead and as we lead up, like, how do we help people think about a different way of approaching leadership? Because some people don't realize they have the power to help people move into their next. And so sometimes we don't even see people, right? We're just moving through our day to day, we're doing what we do, and we're not seeing people. What I love about your story is Jim not only saw you, but then he acted, like he moved you to the place that
Yes.
you were better fit
Yes,
for.
absolutely. And I'm that's why I always like to give Jim a shout out because we as leaders, we get so busy and we're running around like our hair's on fire that a lot of times we become very focused on finishing the task,
Yeah.
checking off the list, doing more work, right? But leadership, a big part of what we're called to do is truly that. We've got to develop people, we've got to find top talent, keep top talent, and then nurture top talent, right? So the people part of our business should be where you're spending like 75% of your time. And if we're being intellectually honest, a lot of times we're not.
Yeah.
Right, we're spending most of our time doing other things and we're completing the task, but that's very different than leadership, right? And so, to your point, yeah, one of the things I'm incredibly grateful for is that Jim took the time to see me
Hmm.
and then he then executed. And so one of the, I know we're going to talk about my book Ally Leadership, but
Yeah.
Ally is an acronym and it stands for ask, listen, learn, you take action. And the
Wow.
reason why that was important to me, I could have called the book Allyship, but that's
Hmm.
not what I'm actually talking about in the book. I'm actually talking about we as leaders being the type who can lead today's modern workforce and how what's required of us now more than ever is
Hmm.
that we know how to truly ask questions we don't know the answer to. Because a lot of times leaders ask questions they
Yeah.
absolutely know the answer to,
Yeah.
right? So we're going to ask questions we don't know the answer to. We're going to listen, like really listen to what people are saying. Because if you ask and you listen, by default, you're going to learn. And then if you learn, now you have a responsibility to do something with that. And that's why
Hmm.
the why is you take action. And so I appreciate that Jim saw me and he, asked me a question. So he listened, but then he executed. He used his
Hmm.
power to do what he needed to do or could do that then changed to your point, changed the whole trajectory of where I was headed. One thing, somebody asked me this question recently, and I really thought about it, and I'm going to share it with your listeners. They're
Hmm.
like, well, how do you develop what are some things that you can do to see people and really develop people and so on and so forth?
Yeah.
And what I told the leaders is I said, don't overcomplicate this. This is one question I want you to ask every single person on your team. What is one personal goal that you're going for? And I would be honored if you tell me one thing I can do to help you achieve it.
Wow.
That's it. We don't need to make this long and complicated. You don't need a 6 week course on it, right? Just ask that one question, listen to their answer, and then do something, right? Because
Mhm.
you've got the power. You're the leader. And so they're not going to ask you something that's probably world changing, right? They're probably going to tell you they don't know, right? At the
Yeah.
beginning, it's like, okay, I know that you may not know. Give it some thought because again, it would be my honor to be able to help you, but I need tell me one thing I can do. I don't need 10 things to do, right? I don't need another job about this, right? Like
Yeah.
one thing I could do to help you achieve it. And that alone, not only will it build trust between you and your employee, your colleague, or whomever you're asking the question to, but it will also grow and develop you as a leader so that you get into the habit of not just running around like your hair's on fire, but really being about the people because that's the responsibility that we've got. I always say one day I'm going to stand there in front of my maker and have to be accountable for his
Yeah.
most valuable asset, which is the people he gave me influence over. What will I say? Right. And so that's the same thing I want your leaders to be thinking about as well, your audience.
That's so good. As you're talking, I'm thinking a lot about some pretty bad hiring practices that I've seen over the years. Talk to me a little bit about maybe familiarity and unconscious bias and how that can just limit organizations and your own personal leadership when you kind of want to build this environment around you that looks very similar to who you are versus really thinking about diversity as an asset and a key kind of cornerstone to your leadership.
Yeah, I love that question. That's a really powerful question. And how I would answer it, right, is you're right, we all have bias. And, so bias has been such a negative word. And there are some biases that are actually good and keeps us safe, right? But,
Mhm.
bias for the most part, where leaders don't necessarily think about it, is how does it hinder your results?
Mm.
Because if our brain wants to do things that are easier,
Yes.
and so dealing with people who are just like you, think like you, see the world the way you see it, believe in what you believe in, talk like you, communicate like you, look like you, it's just easier cognitively on our brain. It's less of a cognitive overload because it's very familiar. But
Yeah.
to your point, you don't want a team full of people that think like you, communicate like you, see the world the way that you see it, because that's going to limit your results. I always tell people it's not about DEI, it's about ROI. We're in business, we
Hmm.
need to produce a result. And
Yeah.
so the best way that you can do that is by having people who do not think like you, look like you, communicate like you, or see the world the way you see it, sitting around the room, because you're going to be able to get the best talent, or I should say, the best ideas pulled forward so that you can have that competitive advantage, right? That's the role of the leadership. Now, the second part of that is, listen, we don't have to have conversations anymore about whether diverse teams are better than traditional teams or not. The research is clear, and I always tell people I can quote you a bunch of stats, but go Google it for yourself. Deloitte has a lot of information on it. McKinsey has a lot of information on it. Harvard Business Review has a lot of information on it. There's just a ton of information that simply says diverse teams outperform homogenous teams every single time, right? So it's
Hmm.
not about DEI, it's about ROI. Our job is to get the best result from the best people. And how you do it is making sure that the people who are not like you are
Yeah.
actually in the room as well. So, yeah, so I always want leaders to realize that it hinders, it may feel familiar, but it
Hmm.
really is doing you and them a disservice, because I guarantee you, research says, I don't say it, research says, you're not going to get the biggest ROI by having everybody who has so much familiarity and similarity. The last part I want to actually mention on this whole thing
Hmm.
is, there's another way to think about this, right? A lot of times it's simply easier to lead people who are absolutely like you and see the world the way you see it and who work like you work, right? And one of the things that I've had to learn how to do just as a leader coming up in throughout my career is I've had to rewire my brain with that, right?
Hmm.
Because it's easier. I work at a very fast pace. So it's very easy. If you can keep my pace, I'm automatically going to like you, right?
Yeah.
Because we're like, we are run until
Yeah.
apprehended, right? But if you know, if I have people on my team who don't keep up that same kind of pace,
Yeah.
well, it doesn't mean that they're not as effective. They could be even more effective. But if I don't give them enough space, then I'm going to kind of roll over them because I'm
Yeah.
running at such a sharp pace. And that's not fair. But also, it's doing a disservice to me and the business, because they may be a person who needs to process the information a little bit. It may take them a minute, or maybe it
Mhm.
takes them a longer thing. But I guarantee they're going to come back with something I probably missed because I was too busy running fast, right? And so that's an example that, I really had to work on myself, and to really realize that just because things with that they're the way that they process is perhaps a little bit slower than I process, it doesn't mean it's worse. It just means it's different. My way is one way. It's not the only way, right? And
Yeah.
so, one of the things that I just encourage leaders to do is, as you professionally mature, you really need to start looking for those folks that are, voices that you don't tend to go and ask, hey, what do you think about this? Right.
Yeah.
And then you also, in meetings, since you're the leader and you can probably have a big influence on the meeting, is create the space that is psychologically safe enough that people who are not like you can raise their hand and say, you know what, I hear what we're talking about. I see the direction we're going, but can I throw up another, way to look at it, because I'm concerned, because I think we may be missing this point, this point, this point, this point, right?
Hmm.
Well, the leader has to create an environment where people feel safe enough to say that. Because if you don't create that environment, then what will happen is the people who are not like you will just sit there, smile, and nod,
Yep.
and then everybody's going in this direction. When if something blows off the tire, right, and falls apart, then that's the person who's secretly like, I could have, I saw this coming, but
Uh-huh.
nobody asked me, or nobody
Yeah.
allowed me to say anything, or when I did say something, people interrupted and moved on, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of dynamics happening that leaders have to, you got to be zoned in to really watch it and see. And again, you can't do that if you're too busy checking off the to-do list and running around like your hair is on fire.
This is so important. I think I want to pause on this section of what you're saying because um, several years ago, I got certified in HBDI, and it's all about thinking preferences. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
there's four quadrants, and it's how do you think, and typically you assemble a team in typically maybe two or three of the quadrants, but then you have this quadrant that's always left out. And what happens is you bowl over the people like you talked about that are in that quadrant because you're not used to hearing that voice.
Yep.
Because, my voice doesn't sound like what's happening in that quadrant. So if you love big vision and caring about people, but someone else is like, hey, financially, the math's not mathing. Oh, well, don't listen to
Yep.
him. We're just going to go after our vision, right? And then we're like, why did it fail? And I
Right.
think that what you're talking about is so important and it's twofold. It's how do we make decisions, making sure we're bringing the right people to the table. And instead of, hoping that they jump in or can find a way to get a word in edgewise, why don't I draw them out? Because I know
Yes.
they think differently and say, so and so, you haven't spoken, and I really
Hmm.
need to hear from you. You typically process, yes, it takes you a little bit longer to process, but that's because you have attention to detail. And
Right.
you are the one that actually gets into the detail for us and helps us see what we're missing. You find our blind spots, you find those potholes in the road that we're going to hit, or even the landmines that we don't know about. So, even if
Hmm.
I can't get you to tell me in this meeting, I need you to take away this conversation and come back tomorrow and tell me what you think. Because without what you bring to the table, we have an incomplete plan. And I love that you're saying that because so often we just run so fast, we don't even know we're running with incomplete plans.
That's right. That's right. And that's so powerful. And it's funny. It brings up two things that I'm thinking. I
Mhm.
remember one when I used to coach executives, and I remember having an executive who called me, and she was just like frustrated. She says, "I'm going to have to let so and so go," and I was like, "Huh, okay. Well, why? What's happening?" And she said, and it was a PR firm. And so, and if you've ever been around PR people, they tend to be extroverts, right? And which makes sense for the job. And
Yeah.
so, but this one lonely PR person was an introvert.
Hmm.
And so as the music's blasting and they're all together in their shared workspace trying to figure out, how do they pitch this and pitch that? Well, the poor introverts like just overwhelmed with all the energetic energy going on, right? And so would kind of just separate herself and take a breather, if you will. And so, but the rest of them saw that as she's distant or she
Mm,
doesn't want to participate or she's not a team player and, so on and
right.
so forth. And so I said to the leader who had called me, I said, well, tell me about her work. Oh, her
Yeah.
work is great. Clients love her. It's like the best work. I said, okay, so it's not a performance issue. No, it's not that. I say, all right, so has she caused problems in the workplace? I mean, other than like separating herself, but is she causing any chaos? No, not everybody likes her when she's sitting there, but when she
Yeah.
walks off, they feel a certain way. And I had to really talk to that leader, and she just hadn't realized that you have a room full of extroverts and you
Yeah.
got one introvert and all she
Yes.
needs is a minute sometime, right? Like,
Hmm.
and so just understanding the dynamics of how people function. An extrovert, by the time they get to the office, they've stopped, they've gotten in their car, they had to go get gas, they had to talk to the gas person, they had to talk to the by the time they get to work, they're already exhausted, right? Because of all the energy that they had to put forth with all the people stuff, right? So you just have to be mindful, but you want that because you know what, to your point, she produced amazing work
Yeah.
and clients loved her because of her eye to detail, right? And so
Hmm.
that was one thing. But the other thing, a more practical thing that I'd love to have your listeners consider, I used to do this all the time, especially when I was running sales teams. Whenever I was running a sales team, most likely I was brought in to take over a team because the team wasn't performing, right? And so you've got to build that trust, and there's a whole song and dance that goes along with that. But one of the ways that I did it was to make sure that I wasn't pushing things from the top down. So, for an
Mm,
example, let's say my CEO is like, "Hey, Steph, just finished with the board. Here's what the new number is going to be for this year that your team has to produce." No problem. Let's just say it was $1 billion, just to make it easy.
mhm.
And so he never told me, and here's exactly how you're going to do it, right? That's not his job. That's my job. I got to figure out how we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Now, I could have, as the head of sales, saying, okay, $1 billion, got it. I got X amount of sales reps. Here, we're going to break it down. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's everybody's plan. I could have done that, right? But I chose not to. And what I would do is I'd meet with the team and I'd say, listen, guys, board just came back. Our number for this year is $1 billion. And I could really use your help on how we're going to do it. Right
Yeah.
now, at that point, I let them all talk about their ideas, right?
Yeah.
And usually, what most leaders do, Natalie, at that point is as the ideas start coming forth, the leaders will start squashing it. Well, we can't do
Mhm.
that idea because that's going to cost too much. I mean, you can't do that idea. I hear what you're saying, but can't do that. And they just
Yeah.
start killing stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Tried that 2 years ago. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't work. And so
Yeah.
so the key is to hold your tongue, right? And to really be
Mhm.
disciplined. with just, I would just let them put every idea up there. And it is crazy as some of them were, right? And I knew sitting there, it's not going to work, but that's not the time for me to squash it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So because I've asked for their help, and
Hmm.
this is their thought process of how they think we can do it. So now I've got, a big old whiteboard full of ideas. And so I would say to the team, thank you so much. Guys, that took a lot of courage. I appreciate you giving me, your best thinking here. Now, these ideas, there's a lot. Fantastic. We're not going to be able to get all of these done. So, is there a way that we can narrow these ideas down so that we can get at least two a quarter done? So, let's take this big old list and get it down to eight.
Hmm.
So, which eight should we choose? Now I'm going to sit back again, let them
Yeah.
hash it out, right?
Yeah.
Because people, whenever they give an opinion, they tend to stand and defend the opinion.
Yes.
So that alone is a development skill that you do want your people to have. So I'm just going to sit there, let them hash it all out, right? It may take forever, but it's good. You have an
Hmm.
idea, you should be able to defend it, right?
Yeah.
Now, and now I've got to get them all on board so they decide what the eight are going to be. Again, when they're done, thank you. Man, oh man, I love the candor and I love the
Hmm.
tenaciousness and I love the fact that you guys were honest. And, this is good. This was healthy confrontation. I so appreciate it. So now we've got the eight. Now, what I'd like y'all to do is to go back and based on your regions and the eight focuses that we've got for the year, you come back with the plan on how you're going to achieve it for your region, your region, your region. And then let me know dates and deliverables, what you're going to do by when. So I've done
Hmm.
nothing, all right? All
Yeah.
I did was facilitate a
Hmm.
conversation, but now it's their plan, right? You don't hit that number or you start getting, clunky or whatever. This is a conversation that we can have, which is different because you helped create this plan. It's not like I shoved the plan down your throat,
Right.
right? You helped create it. And so not only did it increase the odds of the plans all getting hit, 100% of quota achieved, but it also in those conversations gave me and them the ability to develop certain muscles that are needed, especially as you're taking and developing people from whatever their role is into a leadership role. Those are the kind of muscles that are needed in that process. And the only way they're going to get it is not by executing on what I tell them to do. It's by them thinking about what should be done because they know the goal, right? How we get there, I could care less. We just got to get there, right? And so those are some things that I really encourage leaders to take to heart because one, it's easier when it takes more time, mind you,
Yeah.
but
For
easier for me
sure.
to go, here's the plan, you just do it, right? But
Yeah.
it takes more time, but it saves you time in the long run. And you are doing what we leaders should be doing. Leaders develop leaders. That's
Yeah.
what we do. And how you do that, that's just an example of one way that I used to get it done.
Okay. So what you just did is you talked about, honestly, this is from not only leadership playbook, but it's innovation playbook. Like
Yeah.
it's like I love we use in innovation, we use the idea of open, which is like
Yeah.
throw out all the ideas, explore,
Mhm.
start to group them, and then
Yeah.
close, narrow and
Yes.
decide. And like
Love
the
it.
fact that they're doing this, they now own it. And like there's
Yeah.
nothing more exciting than when someone takes something away and it's not Stephanie asked me to do this, so now I got to
Right.
go figure it out. It's like that's my idea, it's my plan. I own it. I'm excited to
Yeah.
execute on it. Like that creates a sense of ownership where people now
Mhm.
own the plan, not rent the plan, which is
Yes.
when I get upset with this plan, I'm gonna blame it on Stephanie, right?
Right. That's
Over
right.
here, when I get upset with the plan, I gotta blame it on
Yeah,
myself and figure it
exactly.
out. I've got to figure it
Yes.
out. Like,
I
how am
got
I
to
gonna
figure it
get through this?
out. That's right. That's right. Absolutely. And that's why I think sometimes in leadership is hard, right? It's just really, really hard. And it's getting harder by the minute. So
Mhm.
I don't see it getting easier. And so what leaders have to do is to figure out, well, how am I going to make it easier for myself? And how
Mhm.
you make it easier for yourself is exactly what you just said, Natalie, is to put, trust your people, right? So
Yeah.
put some of that back on them and trust the process. If you've developed them, you've asked, listened, learned, you've taken action, you have that trust there, you know that you've hired some, really great people. Now you've got to actually just kind of trust that they're going to be able to perform, but that's how you do it, and then that way it frees you up to be able to
Yeah.
do the things that only you can do, right? Because
Absolutely.
it's really tough right now leading with, it's not just the people part of it. It is, you got to worry about tariffs, you have to worry about wars, you got to worry about supply chain issues, you have to worry about, all kind of social stuff happening. There's just so much to worry about
Yeah.
beyond hitting the number, retaining top
Yes.
talent, and making sure your board or your shareholders are happy. It's just a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, help me help you put some of that back on your on your
That's
people.
I love that. Help me help you.
Yeah.
I would love for you just to spend a few minutes talking about this incredible book
Thank
and
you.
just maybe talking about some of the themes that have been so important to you in your own leadership and why you decided to put them in here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and thank you for that. So, the reason why I wrote the book is because one of the things that I noticed is a lot of books that were already out there were talking to primarily white men,
Yeah.
saying this is how you lead women and people of color. Well, here I was, a woman of color leading an all white male team, and so I was like, well, where's that book, right? Because
It is not written until
it's
you
not
write
written, right?
it.
Exactly. It's hard out
Yeah.
here. So what I did is I really started to take to heart because listen, I come from an industry that I really didn't, I'm not joking when I said there is nobody, that I could kind of go, oh, I'm going to copy this or,
Hmm.
emulate that or what have you. And so I shared in the book, I shared what I did, the structure that I created in
Yeah.
hopes that it would help others. Because when we think about today's modern workforce, we're all leading people who are not like us. Or if you're
Yeah.
not now, you will, I guarantee you. And now the question becomes, how do you do it? And so in my book, I've already told you the acronym of Ally. There's another acronym, which is the framework of how exactly I did it to create, departments or companies or workforces that thrived, not just survived, but really thrived and achieved, really great results. But the framework is called EARN, which is an acronym. So E stands for, as a leader, I had to establish an environment where people felt psychologically safe enough to share
Mhm.
their thoughts and their ideas and to challenge the status quo, right?
Yeah.
A stood for, I needed to assure alignment. A lot of times leaders would be shocked to realize that your team is not as aligned as you may think. So one thing I always tell people is you should be asking, just go find 5 random people in your company or your team and your business and ask them these 3 questions. What business are we in?
Mm.
Which is going to surprise you what they answer.
Yeah.
How does the business make money? And then what is it that you do that helps contribute to how the business wins?
Mm.
If your employees can get those 3 answers right and they're all in sync, you've already won, hashtag winning, right? So the E, establish an environment. A,
Mhm.
assure alignment. R stands for rally the troops because you got to get your people excited, right?
Yeah.
If they know the business that they're in, they feel that they can voice their opinion, even if it's not the same opinion as everybody else. You create that kind of environment and then you rally them towards one cause, right? Now you've got a winning team. I literally could stop right there. But since I'm in aviation, the N stands for navigate, right?
Yeah.
And, it's important that the team knows here's where we're going and why, and here's
Hmm.
when we're going to get here and by when, right?
Yeah.
And so, the example that I always use, Natalie, is that pilots in my industry, you will never find a pilot that gets to the plane and goes, so where are we going? Like it just doesn't happen, right? Like, how are we going to get there? Like, I don't know. I mean,
Terrifying if they
yeah,
do.
it's terrifying, right? Can you imagine being in the boarding area like, oh, welcome to flight such and such and such and such. We don't know where we're going, but get on board, right? Right? The whole industry of aviation is one big
Love that.
logistical situation. So you
Yeah.
have to know how to navigate. So I always want leaders to realize that your people do need to know here's where we're going and why. A lot of times people use all hand meetings and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and they may tell them maybe if we're lucky, where we're going, but they don't tell them why, right? Like,
Mhm.
why are we going there?
Yeah.
How are we going to get there? By when are we going to get there? And if there's a rough patch, then what's the backup plan? Right? Pilots know all of that. They know if I'm going this way and all of a sudden I hit weather, I got to go around. They have a backup plan.
Mhm.
So, anyways, that's how leaders should be leading. And that's all in the book as well. So, I wrote the book to say, here's how I did it. I didn't always, hit the mark, right? Sometimes I missed the mark. Actually, a lot of times I missed the mark. And I share those too, right? I'm an open book. But I know that right now, like I said, leadership is hard. I
Yeah.
know that right now, if we're wise, we should have a team that is nothing like us. And they're not even like each other. And trying to lead all of those differences is not easy. And that
Yeah.
means that every leader has to level up if you want to be the type of leader that continues to get promoted. Because I will tell you, especially as a person in a boardroom, what companies aren't looking for is we don't need you to have technical skill. You don't put it this way. The technical skills is not what's going to promote you. We expect you to have your technical skills.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
operations or finance or sales or marketing, we expect you to know the basics in that,
Yep.
right? What we're really promoting is how well can you interact with people? How well
Yes.
can you lead people with who are not like you, right? How
Yes.
well can you create that vision, create that psychologically safe environment to really move the business and move your departments forward? And
Yeah.
that's really what the book is really designed for. So it allowed me to get to the highest level, and I'm hopeful that some of those tools can help other leaders, get there as well.
I know they will. This book is very thought-provoking, and I know that as our ladies, so all of our ladies who are in Thrive Today have received this book in their quarterly box already.
Yay!
So if you're part of our community, you've already received this box. If you're listening and you're not a part of our community, Stephanie, how do people find and follow you and get the book?
Oh, well, of course. So thank you. So the easiest way is probably stephaniechung.com. That's my website, tells you everything. And we also have online training. So there's the book. And then if you're like, oh, I love this book, I want more, we also have an ally course or an earn course that they can take, self-paced, and super proud of that work as well, where you've got frameworks and, you can really do some deep inner work to get yourself prepared to be the type of leader who can truly lead all God's children. So,
I love that.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been so incredible, and I just know that our ladies are going to get so much value out of not only this conversation, but checking out all your content on stephaniechung.com.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was fun.
This
Best
was
call of
fun.
the day, Natalie.
Yay, that's awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining the Thrive Today podcast. We are a community for women who lead and believe. Head over to thrivetoday.com to learn more. And until next time, keep leading with purpose, conviction, and faith. We'll see you soon.